On this episode of Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, we talk about the second home market, what it's like to do two different startups, very successful companies, how to get into real estate at a very young age and succeed in this business. It's going to be an incredible show. Tune in. You talk about it privately, we talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Keith Robinson, aka Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes, sir.
Keith, tell us about Austin Allison, CEO of Picasso, former CEO and founder of Dotloop. We talked a lot about a lot of stuff here, so dive in a little bit.
Yes, Austin taught us how to be a baller on a budget. I'm sure he would not call it that. He's much more eloquent. But he talked to us about the startup world of residential real estate, what it's like to launch not one, but two different companies, what some of that experience is like. Yeah, very successful. Started in residential real estate as an agent at 18 years old, gave us some insight and advice on what that was like, and is really passionate around second home ownership, affordability, and trying to create a company that can help with all of those things. It was a really thoughtful and interesting conversation.
It's a great show. Let's do it.
Let's go.
Austin, we're super excited to have you on the show today. I know you and I have known each other for a very long time. We usually like to start with just a little bit of your background.
I thought you were going to say bourbon.
Well,
no?
Bourbon or vodka. Yes.
Okay.
But for the listeners and viewers, just a little bit of your background. I'm sure a lot of people know who you are, but you've been in this industry a long time. I'll let you do your own, background information, but you've got a very interesting historical perspective on the industry, and you've been in a lot of different shoes. So we'll start there.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you both for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Of course.
I would say it probably makes sense to sort of start at my childhood. My dad was a carpenter, and so I was swinging a hammer by age 3 or 4. And I think that kind of gave me the real estate bug very early on. And when I turned 18, I needed to find a way to pay my way through college because, being the son of a carpenter, we grew up paycheck to paycheck. So real estate was that solution. I started selling real estate when I was 18, and that enabled me to kind of pay my way through college. And
that is awesome.
That actually led to my first real estate tech company. I had finished undergrad and I went on to law school after undergrad, and I was in my first year of law school chasing buyers and sellers around to get signatures on the trunk of my car. And
you were like the Lincoln lawyer of residential real estate.
Exactly.
Basically, that's awesome.
Exactly. And I thought to myself, like, this can't continue. There's no way we're going to be, signing carbon copy forms for forever. It seemed inevitable to me that real estate transactions would come online. So I started a company called Dotloop to go kind of pursue that vision. And
that was in Keller Williams originally, right? You were in KW at that time when you were building that out. Is that right?
Well, I actually wasn't part of Keller Williams. I was at an independent brokerage called Sibsey Klein in Cincinnati, where I'm from. And Keller Williams was one of our first big customers, though.
Got it.
We had a bunch of customers, but Keller Williams was like the game changer for us, if you will.
That's awesome. And then from there, it continued on. You ended up exiting that venture when you sold to Zillow.
Yeah, so we started it in 2009, sold to Zillow in 2015. I stayed on at Zillow for about 4 years before taking a year off to start Pacaso. And I know we'll probably talk about Picasso a little bit later, but basically there is some relevant backstory in my background, which is that growing up the son of a carpenter, home ownership is not a foregone conclusion. It's not a guarantee. It's like a dream. It was a dream for me, like it is for many people. And my real estate journey enabled my wife and I to become homeowners. And eventually it enabled us to become second homeowners in Lake Tahoe. And that second home that we purchased just fundamentally changed our lives for the better. And I wanted to find a way to make that possible for more people. So I'd been thinking about that problem for the last 10 years or so. And we started Picasso about 3 years ago to make that vision a reality.
Well, we'll dive into that because we want to talk about this. It's a really interesting business that you put together. But I have some questions that just I think general audience would want to know. So you've done these multiple startups. How do you go raise capital for that? And have the influence to
you ask a lot of times. That's
yeah, I mean, like,
Exactly.
but like
Yeah.
people, I think people have this like, you know, thought process about Silicon Valley and just startups and money's flowing everywhere, but they don't understand like really how hard it is and what it takes to do it. So
Yep.
when we're talking to one of the most successful people that have done it, what does that look like? Like, how long does it take? How many meetings? It just kind of give people the concept of taking an idea of 10 years you've had in your head to fruition.
Well, first off, it depends a lot on the market, the macro environment that you're in.
Mhm.
So it was a heck of a lot easier to raise money in 2020 and 2021 than
Right.
it is in 2023. So that's
they
the
were
first
just
thing to know.
FedExing stacks of racks, right? You were just
Exactly,
getting
yeah.
like opening FedExes with
I mean,
hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash or whatever.
as long as you had a pulse and, you know, something that you could call a business plan, you know, your odds were pretty good that you might be able to raise some money back then. But now it's very hard. And when I first started raising capital for my first company, which was late 2008, you all remember what happened in 2008 and 2009, right? It wasn't
Good times.
exactly a vibrant
Feels similar,
market.
by the way.
It does feel
right.
similar in some respects. But I mean, the way that I did it back then was just hustle. I mean, I talked to a lot of people. Interestingly, and I didn't know anything about raising money. I read a book on, you know, how to raise money. I had never even heard of the term angel investor. So like I was literally starting from scratch. And the first guy that ever invested in me was my former employer. I was an intern at a company called Duke Realty, a commercial real estate firm that was based in Indianapolis. And I was working in the Cincinnati office. And I was working for this amazing guy who's still a mentor and a friend of mine named Jerry. And basically, I went into Jerry one day and I said, "Hey, Jerry, I'd been working on this idea on the side, and I think it has potential, but it needs somebody to sort of go make this dream a reality, and it also needs capital." And he said, "Well, can you show me the prototype?" And I walked across the desk and showed Jerry the prototype. And after I showed him the prototype, he sat me down on the other side of the desk and he said, "You know, Austin, I've got two thoughts. The first thought is you have to go pursue this dream. I can feel your passion and your energy when you're describing this product. This may be the chance of a lifetime. You know, I love that you're loyal to Duke Realty, but hey, we're always going to be here. You know, our door's open if you want to come back and work for us, but like, you got to go follow your heart here. Number two is, would you allow me to be your first investor?" And I don't think Jerry had ever invested in a tech company. He just basically believed in
bet
me
on you,
as an entrepreneur. And I said, sure, you know, and then I asked Jerry if he had any friends. Jerry introduced me to a couple of his friends. Next thing you know, over a period of 3 or 4 years, we had raised something like $5 million from these angel investors, $50,000 to $100,000 at a time.
Shout out Jerry. Like, can we just have a shout out? Like, Jerry, if you're listening, you're the man. Like, way to go, Jerry.
Absolute legend. You know, it worked out well for him. You know, on both Dotloop, he followed us into Picasso. You know, he's a great guy and a great friend, and I've learned a ton from him. But the second time around, I had more experience. I had raised money from venture capitalists. We had a lot more of a team. It wasn't just me. It was my co-founder, Spencer Raskoff, who's also, you know, very proven, obviously. And we had a whole team of people that we had worked with in the past. So it was a very different narrative the second time around.
Sure.
And we went straight to venture capitalists in that scenario. We pretty much skipped the angel investor step. And, you know, again, we did have to talk to a lot of people. We heard a lot of no's, but we had a couple of early investors that believed in us. And, you know,
how many no's did you get? I think this is important to hear because I've been through this myself, not to the degree that you are, but I think people don't realize like how many no's you have to take to get to a yes, even in the angel series or just the market conditions. Like when you were doing Dotloop, how many conversations for investment did you have when you raised that $5 million? Just curious.
Oh, I mean, at least 100, but more likely, it's been a while, so I don't remember the specifics.
But it was a lot.
At least
100.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 200 or 300. I mean, but everybody that I talked to said no, essentially. And it was the outlier that said yes.
Right.
I mean, we didn't talk to nearly as many people this time around at Picasso because we had a lot more relationships. But
you had a track record too.
we still got a lot of no's.
Sure.
You know, even with the track record and an amazing team and a big idea, we still got a lot of no's.
Right.
So it's hard. It's really hard.
I think that's the thing that people don't, they see, I have these conversations a lot. They see the end result and they're like, wow, you're so lucky. Or, I
love
hate
it.
that
I
word
hate that one.
sometimes. It drives me nuts
Now,
because
luck is involved, though. Luck is
I'm not
involved.
saying there isn't,
Yeah.
but I actually say there's a little bit there, but most of it is just sheer grit and like perseverance and willing to like take 100 no's to get to 5 yeses. That just is like a certain mentality of human being that can be shot down over and over and over again. And then you get that one check and you're like, okay, like someone believes in it. I just got to find 10 more of those or 20 more of those.
Yeah. I think one thing that's helpful though, I think, James, is starting early. Like when I started my first company, I was only 23. And I mean, I was just dead broke. I had no other option but to like see this thing succeed. You know what I mean? And I think like starting, if I hadn't had, a win and some financial stability in my life, I mean, I do think it would be harder in this environment versus before when I was just left with no choices.
Right.
I got a question going back to 18-year-old Austin getting into real estate to pay for college. Someone listening to this probably is, young and just starting in residential real estate. What advice would you give to them, or what advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you know now, looking back about the craft of residential real estate, the industry of residential real estate? You basically grown up in this industry, right? So what advice would you give to an 18-year-old that happened to be listening to this, or a 19-year-old just starting in residential real estate?
I would say number one, surround yourself with as many great people as you can. That story about Jerry, was one of many people that I was fortunate to connect with that served as mentors, and they enabled me to shorten the learning curve because I was able to benefit from their successes and their failures. And there's really, reading books is also helpful, but in my experience, there's nothing that's more helpful than surrounding yourself with great people. Number two is like work your tail off. Like, I remember when I don't know if they still do this in real estate school, but I remember when I went into real estate school, I did this evening course, and they sort of positioned it as though I was going to become, a millionaire in the next 5 years, like guaranteed. Like, congratulations.
It's all 3 martini lunches and white Mercedes, right?
Yeah. It's like, congratulations, you're now guaranteed to be a millionaire because you're a real estate agent. And it's like, that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, real estate is an amazing industry and you can do very well, but it's super hard work. Like, the people that do it well earn it. They don't just like show up and have it land on their lap. And I think that is a common misconception that people have when entering the industry. Those would probably be the top 2. I guess if there was one more I would add, it would be follow your heart. Like, I'm a big believer in following your passion, whatever that passion is, because obviously if you're pursuing something that you love, you end up doing better work and working harder. So if you love real estate, go after it. But if you're just entering this industry because you think it's a great way to make money, that's probably the wrong reason to be in the industry.
On that passion part, because there's this lie that sort of permeates life where people say, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? Well, that's bullshit, right? Let's just go ahead and square that away. Right?
You work more, actually, but that's fine. Yeah.
If you're passionate about it and you love it, you will work harder than someone who isn't, right?
Yeah.
And if you work harder than someone, then you will get a better result, right? So, but this whole narrative of you'll never work another day in your life, that's not true.
You mentioned reading books. What's your favorite book this year that you're reading, just for people to grasp onto? Like, what's your go-to right now?
So my favorite book that I read this year is called Die with Zero.
That's a good one. That's on my stack. I haven't read it yet.
So it's so good. And you really got to read.
I don't know if you have kids, but don't let your kids see you reading that. They're going to be pissed.
Interestingly, when you read the book, given the title of the book, it's easy to draw conclusions around kind of the thesis. But the book is not actually just suggesting like, spend all your money and don't give anything to your kids. And in fact, and it's also not only
never mind. I don't want to read it then.
It's not only a book for people with with a lot of wealth either. Like, as an example, one of the things they talk about in the book is there's this idea that we have these arcs in our life. One arc around health, like our well-being, another arc around wealth, and another arc around available time. And a life that's sort of lived to the fullest is one where you've optimized those three arcs throughout your life. So like, as an example, when you're young and broke and have a lot of time in your hands, that's the time to go backpack around Europe. Right. And that's not something that you have to have a lot of money for, right? You can go backpack and stay in hostels, and that's a die with zero life experience. Versus as you're older in life and maybe your health isn't quite as good, but you have more financial means, there's different activities that are optimal for that stage in life. So
you mean stay at the Ritz? Is that
that's one example. But it really has been a transformative book for me, and I highly recommend it.
We'll have to put that on our list to go through. All right. Well, I want to dig into this now. So your big passion project, as you mentioned, for 10 years you've been thinking about this, was essentially Picasso. And let's start there. I mean, you mentioned you got a house in Tahoe. Congratulations. A beautiful part of the world. Tell us about Picasso. What formed it? Like, where is it today? Where was it then? Like, give us some background on that, and we'll dive in on a lot of questions around that venture as well.
Absolutely. So it was 10 years ago. My wife and I bought this second home in Tahoe, and we hadn't sold to Zillow yet. So I didn't have the financial freedom that I have today. It took everything that we had financially to buy this home. We put all of our money down. We actually couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, so we had to rent the home out on Airbnb to pay the mortgage. So it was a real stretch for us financially. But that home was perhaps the best thing that we ever did as a couple. Like, it became this happy place for us that enabled us to like clear our mind, recharge our batteries, feel accomplished. You know, the neighbors in that community became our close friends. Like, we didn't just buy a home, we bought a second life in many ways. And it was very enriching. So I wanted to find a way to make that possible for more people, because I learned how special it is, number one, and number two, how inaccessible it is due to home prices and now interest rates. But the other thing that I learned about second homes is that most of them sit empty 10 to 11 months per year. So now,
I can vouch for that. So
you're not alone. I mean, the national average is 5 weeks per year. That's how often people use their second home.
Really?
And there's not much that's worse for a community or worse for a housing industry than empty second homes, because it constrains the inventory, the industry of inventory, which drives up home prices. It starves local businesses because there's no owners in those homes supporting the businesses year round. So the whole idea behind Picasso was, what if we could take all these empty second homes and connect them with all these aspiring homeowners in a more efficient and sustainable ownership structure, which we describe as co-ownership. And that was the idea in a nutshell. And it's going super well. We've done about $1 billion in cumulative sales. We have about 1,500 happy owners now. We've done about 70,000 stay nights, or our owners rather have used their home about 70,000 nights consecutively. So it's going very well.
So conceptually, I'm going to break this down for simple terms. Essentially, you guys source a property. I'm assuming you buy the property, and then you guys manage that property as well. Like, you take care of making sure that it's cleaned and all of this stuff for the ownership group. And then you sell it in fractions. That may not be the right word, but essentially a percentage of time that somebody can own in that property, up to 8. Did I get that right? Or is it?
That's pretty much right. I mean, the easiest way to get your mind around it is, imagine if you and 3 or 4 of your friends or family members wanted to buy a home together. Picasso enables you to do that, except for you don't have to know the other people, because we manage every detail. We design the home, we furnish the home, we clean the home. We provide financing. So 70% of our owners use financing to buy their share. That's all originated through Picasso. It's really like kind of a whole new way to own real estate that's hassle-free.
Yeah, I love it, because I can speak to that of owning a property and then being like, I use it 5 weeks out of the year. I love the damn thing.
I can speak to using your property.
Like, does anybody want to use it? Like, please, for God's sake, somebody use the damn thing. You know,
put me on your list, James. I'm always down for a free second home.
Well,
I have a question
yeah.
about it, because when I first looked at it, and this was a while back when you guys were launching, but one of the things that I thought was really powerful, and I'd love to get an update on how it's worked, is there isn't really a marketplace for second home, right? Like
Right.
the whole 4 people buying together example is great until one of them goes through a divorce and has to sell.
Exactly.
And what do you do with
Exactly.
that? How has that journey of trying to create the marketplace first, how's that going? Give us a quick update on that space, because that's the part to me that, like, if you crack the code, not that you need me to tell you what I like and what I don't, but like crack the code on that, and now this is an offering that is unique in a way of nothing else I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right that the marketplace piece of it is super important. It's going really well. We actually just issued a press release last week that included some of the stats from some of our markets. But the headline is that these shares are appreciating at a rate that's as good or better than the underlying real estate. So they're selling faster and appreciating better than what you would expect if you would have bought the whole home. So the secondary market is working super well, and we think it's a really, really important part of the strategy. One other thing that I'll add, though, there are a couple of problems with the DIY co-ownership model. One of the problems is what you just alluded to. It's like impossible to sell if you're trying to do this on your own, because there is no market for that. Another challenge with the DIY co-ownership model is financing. The only way to get a loan on a DIY co-owned home is for everybody to sign where you're joint and severally liable. Picasso has solved that problem with effectively a new financing product whereby Picasso steps in and deals with the default if one owner defaults, so that the other owners aren't on the hook. And the third pretty obvious challenge with DIY co-ownership is the hassle. There are a lot of little details that people have to align on, and oftentimes when friends go in on a home together, they end up frenemies because of all these little challenges.
Because everybody wants Christmas, right? And
exactly.
So they're fighting over Christmas. So
and Picasso solves all those problems.
There's been a lot of headlines around changes around short-term rentals, and you might be adjacent to that. You're not exactly. You're not a short-term rental, but what's your opinion on sort of this municipalities bucking against short-term rental? Is that a headwind for you, first of all? And then more importantly, just your opinion on that in general. Like, where do you see all of that going?
Yeah. So, I think it is a bit of a headwind for us because we kind of get caught in the wake of short-term rentals. So we're not a short-term rental. In fact, we actually prohibit short-term rentals in our ownership structure. So we're definitely not the same thing, but oftentimes we're sort of lumped into that same bucket, and there's confusion around what we are or what we're not. So I would say it's a little bit of a headwind from that perspective. In terms of what the right answer is, it's kind of a tough call. I mean, on one side of the spectrum, you have property rights, which are, I have a right to buy this property and I should have a right to survive and rent it out and make it available to other people. But at the same time, like, municipalities also have a right to zone and regulate usage. So I think it's like, I don't know that there is a right answer other than like what's right for a specific community. There's some communities where short-term rentals are the community, if you go to Lake Tahoe, for example, there's something like 10,000. Don't quote me on these numbers because I'm not super up to speed on the actuals, but I think there's something like 10,000 short-term rentals in the whole great Lake Tahoe area, which is a lot. Like, if you cut short-term rentals out of that ecosystem, it just collapses. You know what I mean? So I think it's like every market's a little bit different, but where I don't think municipalities have a right to regulate is around ownership.
Yeah.
I think it would be wrong for a municipality to say that 2 people can't own a home together because they met on Match. Just like I think it would be wrong for a municipality to say that 2 people can't own a home together because they met through Picasso. So
I don't know. On the first one, I might push back a little. No, I'm just kidding.
You just took it there. We're talking about dating now. So
here we go.
We have a right. We have a right to privacy, and we have certain rights to own property. And I think it's important that municipalities focus on regulating usage, not ownership.
Yeah,
couldn't agree more.
Excellent
it's interesting because I Airbnb my house up in Arnold, in between Yosemite and Tahoe, and it's an important part of the community up there because it's their tourism dollars. That's literally where they get their money is, weekenders coming in and spending money in the community, going to restaurants, etc. And it's always a fight because you have the full-time people. I'll make a controversial statement because I don't give a shit. Like you got full-time people that live there that are like, they hate the weekenders, but they don't realize that they actually drive the economy. Like they're the ones that are they're filling the restaurants, they're doing all of this stuff. There's always this push and pull. New York is a great example of like, you can see where this is, you get this mix up of we need more inventory. There's not enough housing. There's too many short-term rentals. Okay, well then change your damn housing policy. It's not about short-term rentals.
Right.
We all know that a bunch of hoteliers, or however you say that, got involved and essentially lobbied a bunch of people to make changes to the city. Vegas is another great example. You can't do anything under 30 days.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? It's not because anything other than the hotels got that passed as a law. So it's a very interesting time, but it comes down to, I love what you're doing because you're allowing people the opportunity to have that experience. I'm going to take it back to what you and your wife talked about. And my wife and my daughter get to experience that too. You have a second, it's like you're home away from home and it's different. It's experiences, it's vacation. You build different memories that way. It's hard to be able to afford to do that. And what I love is you're giving people that option to spend that 5, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it might be, and not have to pay for the whole thing, which just makes it more achievable. So,
I mean, one other thing that I think is really important to note about what we're doing with co-ownership is not just on the accessibility side of making it possible for more people to own, but co-ownership is actually part of the housing solution. Like we are in the middle of a housing affordability crisis right now, and there's only one way, or well, I guess 2 ways to mitigate this crisis, which is to build more inventory or make better use of the inventory that we have. And co-ownership fits in that second bucket. Like we have all these empty second homes. So if we can consolidate demand into fewer homes, it actually frees up more inventory for the local workforce, which will in turn relieve some pressure on the home prices and the affordability issues. So I think it's important that not just homeowner or not just co-ownership, but I think we need to continue to invest in things like ADUs to enable people to create, space on someone's lawn, or more progressive zoning. Like we just passed a thing called SB 9 in California, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, that allows more density on a single parcel lot. And innovations like this, I think, are going to be really important in the future as we look for ways to create more supply.
So are you are you lobbying? Are you involved in the lobbying efforts to help change some of these laws and some perspective? Are you guys taking that approach now?
Just a reminder, you're being recorded. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, we're
just kidding.
No, I wouldn't say that I would say that we're involved collaborating with municipalities. So when in all the municipalities where we operate, we work very closely with the electeds and the housing groups to try to identify ways to make co-ownership part of the housing solution as opposed to part of the problem.
So I want to double back on the financing piece. Do you portfolio that product inside your company, or do you have a financial backer who's agreed to your structure?
The latter.
Latter.
We're more like an originator, I guess, is the appropriate way to categorize it. Like we go out and we partner with various lending institutions. We then originate these loans on behalf of the institution, and then we provide a guarantee structure over top of the loan that would obligate us to step in and handle a default if somebody defaults.
Which I'm sure they love that piece, right? That extra safety.
Exactly. And we've not had a single default, in 3 years and, many hundreds of loans. But someday there probably will be a default. And
is there a certain type of clientele you're targeting? Like, I mean, is it a certain income level that typically you guys are hitting? This is going to lead into my question about property sourcing. Like, are you at a certain price point? Are you looking to change that price point over time?
Yeah, so we do, to qualify for financing, we obviously do have requirements that the applicant must satisfy. The biggest requirement is the down payment. So you have to put a minimum of 30% down. These aren't like 90 or 100% loans. So that qualifies a lot of people right out of the gate. But most of our properties today are very luxury, or what many would argue, super luxury.
Right.
Long term, our vision is to make, and actually, frankly, midterm, not even long term, but midterm, our vision is to make home ownership accessible across a lot more price points at a lot more markets. So
Yeah, I was cruising around your website prepping for this, and I know when I went last time, it was probably, don't take offense, it was a while ago, right? It was maybe a year ago the last time, but every once in a while I go cruise through because you always have beautiful properties, and but I saw more $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 bite sizes than I ever remember seeing. So it sounds like that's by design. You're trying to widen the aperture and make it accessible for more and more people.
Yeah, and eventually we want $100,000 shares or less, and that won't happen in places like Aspen, or Napa, where home prices are expensive. But it'll happen in places like the Lake Town outside of Chicago or wherever. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of second home destinations that are very relevant regionally, but not as relevant nationally. Like Aspen is a nationally relevant vacation market where people come from all over the world to go. But there's so many of these amazing second home destinations that are drive markets to the cities that surround them, where home prices are more affordable. And I'm really excited about the day that we'll be able to serve those markets.
Are you looking at, this is going to go hand in hand, how do you source the properties? And then my other question, kind of piggybacking, are you looking to do international at some point as well, outside the US?
Yeah, so we're currently, I'll take the second one first. We're currently in London and Mexico, both of which are Cabo specifically, both of which are going really well. Cabo
I'm going to go browse now.
Cabo in particular.
We've lost James for the next 7 minutes, but Austin, you and I can hang out.
Exactly. So, you could definitely expect a lot more in those markets. What was the first part of the question?
And then how do you source the properties? How do you find them? Yeah.
So we basically source from a combination of active listings that are coming online. So we're a licensed broker in all the markets where we operate. So we're getting the feeds and seeing the listings in real time. But we also get a lot of listings direct from our real estate agent partners or direct from sellers. So there's a lot of second homeowners that are sitting on 100% of a home that they only use 10% of the time. James, it sounds like you're in this bucket. Those second homeowners can come to Picasso and sell down part of their home. So you could sell, say, 25 or 50% of your home, take your chips off the table with respect to cashing out your equity while reducing your operating expense and still keeping the home that you love, or at least the portion of it that you love. So that's a big part of it as well.
Interesting. And how are agents part of this process? They send, obviously if they have a property, they're like, hey, take a look at this, which is just talking out loud. That seems like they should keep that in their portfolio when they're meeting with potential sellers. There's lots of options. The open market, we have a partnership with Picasso. We can talk to them about purchasing the property. Go a little bit deeper on that. And I'm assuming there's some type of compensation for them on this. How are they compensated in this process besides just managing the listing?
Yeah, so bringing listings to us is kind of an obvious way to work with us. And we have lots of agent partners that do that. But the other big opportunity is on the buy side. So most good agents have a database of prospective buyers, many of which have larger appetites than wallets, meaning maybe you're looking in Napa and you want a $3 or $4 million home, but your budget is only $500,000 or $600,000, right? Now with Picasso, you can convert that prospect to a homeowner, because this is now a tool in your toolkit that you can use to create new inventory that didn't exist before. And in those scenarios, we pay full commission, so full 3% commission, and we make it as easy as a referral. Like you literally just bring your client to us. We have a portal where you can see the status of everything that's going on. We keep you up to speed throughout the entire process, but we do all the work. You as the agent don't have to do any of the work. We make it as easy as a
good
referral.
Comp, like when an agent will refer to a new home builder, similar?
Very, very good comp. Good comp.
Okay.
So it seems to me that like when I think about this, I'm on this whole kick about our industry has to continue to shift our value proposition from being transactional to be more relationship over the 8 to 13 years that the person owns a property. To me, this is another thing where you're managing this relationship. If you're involved with your client's life, you know what they're doing and where they are in their life. This is an opportunity when they say, I'm thinking about a second home, but I can't afford it. You're like, it's funny you should mention that. Like we have a partnership, and this is where they can start to continue to be another resource in that process.
Or even
Yeah,
just making part of their marketing to their sphere of influence, right? This is another service that I can help you with should at any point you have the need, whether
Right.
it's purchasing a second home outright or access to partnerships with your company or others like them. So this should be part of the discussion for every real estate agent in the US, right?
I've also seen, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen some agents sort of assume that by promoting Picasso, it means that they're like not going to get a whole home transaction out of that deal. So they almost view it as quasi-competitive, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Like if somebody has a $500,000 budget and they want a $3 million home, guess what? They're not transacting anything.
Well, it's also,
right?
yeah,
So
it couldn't be further from the truth. It also couldn't be further from your fiduciary duty, right?
Yeah.
well,
The whole point is you're supposed to put their interests above your own. And if like, we got to stop with all of the, I almost said a bad word, but like,
oh, you can say it. I mean, I always like to have a shirt that says math is hard. Like it's explaining your client can't afford that, but they can afford this. Well, we're getting to the end.
It's one more thing. It's a stepping stone too. So not only are you converting window shoppers into transactions, but many of these window shoppers will become whole home buyers in the future. So the more you can help them today, the more likely they are to transact in the future. And we have some of our agent partners that have made $1 million in commissions on Picasso in the first 2.5, 3 years. So and, like there's real opportunity here.
And most importantly, I mean, making a lot of money is great, but and they served their clients at the highest level.
Totally.
Right. Like
absolutely.
they absolutely, those people's lives were changed because of that real estate professional.
Yeah.
And now they're going to spend the weekend at Tahoe or Napa or pick your favorite destination location. And every time they're going for those 5, 6 weeks, however many, it's because of the relationship with that real estate professional. And that's how we remain in the center of the transaction forever. Right.
Yep.
I love what you're doing. I think it's great. It's a, you know, personally speaking, I know what that opportunity is of having that second property and just the memories it creates for your family. It's different than the house you deal with all your bullshit all day. So, well, Keith has a final question he always uses to wrap up our show. And
you actually, Austin, are going to get 2 final questions, which is the first time in the history of this podcast. So the first one is, My Little Ponies over your right shoulder. Explain.
Oh, I love it. So those little ponies are unicorns, and they have a little Picasso logo on the side of them. When we launched Europe, so as I mentioned, we're in London and looking at other markets there as we speak. But when we launched Europe, we threw a sort of a launch party for some of our agent partners there. And these little unicorns were the little tchotchke kind of takeaway gift thing.
That's awesome. Love it. Yeah, I've got stuffed animals and Hulk cans behind me, so I get it. All right, cool. Now the actual final question that I ask every guest: if you were a real estate broker or agent today, what's the one thing that you would add or change in your business to make the biggest difference?
Well, you know I'm biased. Given my role at Picasso, but I would say that, you know, I've found that times like this, while they can be challenging, present a ton of opportunity because there's new problems that need to be solved, new innovations that come to market, and adopting those innovations to solve these new problems presents a huge opportunity. And I think there is a massive problem around housing affordability and a massive innovation around co-ownership that solves that problem. And I think every agent on the call should at least be considering, you know, Picasso and co-ownership as a tool in their toolkit to convert more window shoppers into homeowners.
Yeah, I couldn't. You've got to do more and do different in this market cycle. And whether that more and different is Picasso or whatever, 2 or 3 things, you can't do what you did in 2020 and have the same result in 2023. It's just not, period, end of story. That's not going to happen. So I love that concept of widening the aperture on the service that you provide, finding different ways to provide value and therefore monetization of the same group of human beings you already service. So spot on, in my opinion.
I love the innovation, and then, you know, your drive. I think it's great for people to hear from a really successful entrepreneur about just the struggles and what it takes and just figuring out how to get there and following that passion too. So thanks for being on the show. And again, we'll have, for all the viewers and listeners, in the description, you'll have a link to Picasso. You can check them out. So Austin, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, enjoyed the conversation.
James, Keith, thank you very much as well. Take care.
Of course.
All right.
Awesome.
I'm going to get me one of those unicorns.
You can send him a Hulk smash thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
We'll trade it. All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
buddy.
See you guys.
It's our job to say out loud what everybody's only thinking to themselves. It's your job to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.